It's the Underdogs. Happy holidays. We're excited to be here with you. I am Jordan Brenner, joined as always by my favorite elf, Peter Keating.
Happy,
Peter,
happy holidays, Jordan. It's a great time of year.
you finished wrapping gifts and taking orders from Santa?
No, not even close. My family has. Things are under our big tree, and I, of course, am late in getting all the last minute gifts. So,
Well, my gift to you and our audience is a special two-part end of year episode that we like to call 2024's best underdog moments. That's
Jordan,
right.
if we each did half the work, how's that your gift to me? I
I
feel like
gave
you
you something
still.
to do. Otherwise, you
Oh,
would have been
that's right. That's very fun. That's very good. I'll remember that. I gave you something. That's. I'm going to use that line. That's fantastic.
you could have been sitting around watching TV having fun, and I said instead look up five underdog
Yeah,
moments, and there we are.
learn something right. Excellent, excellent.
So we're gonna break down today's show, moments 10 through 6
There's
from the
too much
year.
for one show, Jordan.
That's right.
There's two shows we're doing filled with underdog greatness, and this show is the bottom half of the top 10, right?
Right. You'll have to tune in next week for numbers 5 through 1. But
Cliffhanger alert.
big picture, it's super fun to go back and try to make a list like this and just take all the great unexpected underdog things that happen throughout sports in the year and remember them and rank them.
It sure is. So let's get to it. Look, here's number 10. Ready? The
Wait, do we
Detroit
need like a little graphic set, like a number 10?
number 10.
Hit us with it.
The Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Tigers, out of nowhere, expected by nobody to contend massive sellers at the baseball trading deadline, instead made a late season run. On August 10th, they were 55 and 63. That's the fourth worst record in the league. And they were 13 and a half games out from first place, 10 games out of a playoff spot. From that point on, they won an incredible tear, tied for second in the AL Central. Jordan, this is a team that ended up the year below average in runs, home runs, hits, stolen bases, walks. I don't know, maybe attendance. I didn't look that up, but they were below average and everything else. How the hell did this happen? They went 31-13. They knocked Houston out of the playoffs.
I want to correct you on something in the spirit of
yeah.
giving you props. You said a team that no one believed in or no one thought had a chance, and
Oh,
actually,
I set you up, Jordan. One
I,
person did. That was
I wish
me.
I wish we. I don't know if Sarah can pull a clip or not, but I believe in a midsummer show we were talking about underdog opportunities to make a playoff run, and you casually mentioned the Detroit Tigers, and I, being the asshole that I am, mocked you
Jordan, it's
and said
Christmas.
that they
It's
were
holiday time.
they were
Nobody.
so far away, and lo and behold, they did it. So how
Well,
did they do this,
well,
Peter?
look, that you hit on in praising me and trying to get yourself on the nice list. You have hit on something important, which is yes, they were 10 games out of a playoff spot. Guess what? 10 games to make up in a quarter of a season just really isn't that much. They were in the weakest division in baseball. They got to play the White Sox all the time. Minnesota, one of their chief competitors, was racked with injuries. Kansas City, another one of their competitors, as cool a season as the Royals had, right? They were on their way up from what 50 something wins, and so everything was kind of gravy. They weren't a great team; they were a good team. So it has something to do with the competition. It had something to do with Scooble, the Cy Young. They had the Cy Young Award winner, right? So they had the best pitcher in the league. That's definitely part of it.
Right. I mean, Tarek Schoolball is yeah, that no slouch, right?
But Jordan, I want to bring up one thing real quick, which is that we often say in-game managers in-game management in baseball doesn't matter all that
Yes,
much.
I say that often.
And you say that all the time. But in this case, I'll tell you, AJ Hinch mixed and matched the equivalent of like a 12-man rotation in basketball. There's like one player having a breakout great season, Riley Green, and like 14 other guys who played a lot of the time, and most of them played pretty well down the stretch. And he did that especially well with the starting rotation. They were using openers, basically long relievers, as spot starters and openers, including Tyler Holton, who ended up being the second most valuable player on the team, I think, by WAR. And that worked out really well. So they mixed and matched a bunch of parts who were left over and who did pretty great the last quarter of the season.
Yeah, and look, they swept the Astros in the first round, and they were up 2 games to 1 against Cleveland before losing a 5-game heartbreaker. I mean, this team, it shows again what I like to talk about, how much of the postseason is random or anyone can win, but it also sort of capped off a really great season for the AL Central. Maybe it was because they all got to play the White Sox, but
Yeah.
no, 3 teams made the playoffs: Cleveland, Kansas City, Detroit. So that was an exciting thing for smaller markets, as we talked about on our most recent episode with Joe Poznanski.
And look, let's watch the Tigers set it up a little for the coming year. Jackson Jobe, great pitching prospect, great pitch mix, strikeout machine. Colt Keith, I still love Colt Keith, and they got a guy I want to make sure I pronounce this right. Tyrone Lizano, who they got in the Jack Flaherty trade, and he's a
Yep,
20-year-old catcher who just hit 375 in the fall league. So
got it.
we'll move on, but watch how they move on.
All right, that brings us to number 9, the Dallas Mavericks reaching the NBA Finals. On the one hand, hard to say, oh, those terribly underappreciated Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving, but look, they were the 5 seed in the West and made it all the way to the finals. Obviously, lost to the Boston Celtics. But the Mavericks speak to a larger point, and one I've kind of hammered home in the previous couple of springs, which is that the NBA has opened up more than it traditionally has been. This is the third time in 5 years that a 5 seed or worse has made it to the NBA Finals. Even in the preseason, Dallas was not expected to make this kind of a run. Their championship odds were plus 2,500. Their over-under was 45 and a half. But look, in the past 5 years, last year, the Mavs as a 5 seed made the finals. 2023, the Heat as an 8 seed. And in 2020, the Heat as a 5 seed reached it. Last year, also, you had the Pacers as a 6 seed in the Eastern Conference Finals. So, in fact, it's been a decade since the 2 number 1 seeds faced off. It was 2016, the Cavs over the Warriors. And we haven't had a 1 versus 2 matchup since 2019. So there's a little more of a chance for other teams to reach the NBA Finals.
And when that happens, when things are more wide open, it opens up the possibility for mid-season changes being particularly important. On February 8th of last year, the Mavs traded for PJ Washington. They traded for Daniel Gafford and Jason Kidd, who was already getting an MVP season out of Luka, who already was getting the kind of season we were never totally confident Kyrie would put up again, where he was just a great supportive player, but also making all his shots and not causing trouble. He got that out of his superstars, but he also mixed and matched his power forwards and centers really effectively, sometimes for rim protection, sometimes for high percentage shots. You see that especially they were able to cover weak spots and injury spots as the playoffs wore on. That's because they were able to acquire, and also, they got Derek Lively. The players they acquired made a big difference down the stretch.
Yeah, and look, PJ Washington in particular
Yeah.
was just a perfect fit, a godsend. You know, after Kyrie and Luka, who played 40 minutes a game in the playoffs, Washington played about 36 minutes a game. He was really on the court a lot. And then, yeah, they mixed and matched some. Obviously, that center duo of Lively and Gafford did exactly what they needed around those 2 big scores. And what was interesting is they also saw their shortcomings in the Celtics series, and as we've moved on to this year, they've looked to address them. I don't know that Klay Thompson's ultimately going to be able to fully solve what they need, but they clearly needed more shooting. They brought him in.
Yeah, they brought him in, and they just hung 143 points on the Warriors. So I mean,
Yes.
it's pretty amazing.
But the point is, and it was sort of similar to how Denver kind of moved from mid-pack to a top team a couple years ago. Dallas did it last year. Now they're 17-9 again this year and threatening for the 1 seed. There's the margins are small enough in the league that, as you said, 1 or 2 changes or a couple areas of key improvement can be all the difference you need to be a true contender.
And they're set up well going forward, as you just pointed out. They addressed their shortcomings, and they're a real contender now. And so when we take a break, we'll come back with
No.
just said, after number 8. I'm sorry, my fault. I jumped the gun there. All right.
So let's
then
move on.
Let's just lead to number 8.
So let's move on to number 8. Peter?
Let's move on to a stunning upset in the Olympics. The USA women winning their first ever medal in rugby, trailing 12-7 at the last second. They scored a stunning. I mean, you saw Alex Cedric busted out of a couple of tackles after a couple of good passes and ran 94 yards down the field. Here's something I hadn't known before this. But like in American football, if a play's going on while the clock runs out, time doesn't expire till the play's over. And in this case, it was a game-winning play for the bronze medal. Fantastic comeback. and fantastic tactical strategy and fantastic execution at the end, getting the USA women the bronze medal in women's rugby.
What was cool about this particular moment was it sort of captured all sorts of different categories of underdog goodness that we talk
Yes.
about, right? So first of all, the sport itself, we talked about it in the Olympics as an underdog candidate to gain popularity, to break out, right? And it did. People really latched on to this team. Alona Marr became a transcendent star, so much so to the point where she ended up on Dancing with the Stars after,
Yeah.
right?
And
So,
basically was robbed. Dancing with the Stars won by Joey the Bachelor. We'll have to spend some other time on another show talking about that, or maybe not. But it's ridiculous.
but the number of people I heard from during the summer who are casual sports fans at best,
Mm-hmm.
and were tuning into the Olympics and knew nothing about rugby, and they're like, Alona, I love Alona. Is it Alona or Alana? I think it's
Well,
Alona.
I think it's Alona. Yeah,
Okay.
you can leave that question. You can leave
Thanks,
that question
Sarah.
Alona, Jordan.
Excellent. I'm home alone right now. Anyway, she look, she captivated the nation with her personality, and then the team was good enough to get people to continue to watch, and they discovered, oh, this sport's pretty cool and exciting, and then people were tuning into more and more of the games. So that alone was an underdog victory for women's rugby in this country. But then, as you said, to take that to the next level and have such a defining moment, a walk off, essentially, as the time expired, and then, casually making the conversion kick
Yeah,
to
that was cold. That was cold
clutch.
as ice. Like making the conversion kick. As the announcers were talking about how all the pressure was going to be on them
Right.
now to actually convert for the win, the kick sailed through, and they're like, "Oh, it's over."
And Peter, I mean, I really enjoyed watching these games, and I knew very little about rugby. You agree?
I completely agree. It inspired me to learn more about rugby, and I want to bring something up. Ilona,
Mm-hmm.
who's now a two-time Olympian, has signed with the Brist. Jordan, my ears are falling off. Has signed with the Bristol Bears of the Premiership in rugby in England for the last 3 months of the season. So she's probably going to make her debut in January. And you know how they talk about the Caitlin Clark effect? They're not talking about the Ilona Maher factor. The matches that are going to be her debut matches have already been moved to bigger venues in England.
In
Not
England,
even
so
in England. Yes, she's
I
become a
mean,
transcendent star. Yes.
that is really, really cool. Like, look, we're not going to. Sometimes people make big proclamations about this. Oh, people will be tuning in from the U.S. and watching. Look, we know people have very short attention spans, especially in this country. So I'm not here to say that, oh, women's rugby has found a defining moment in terms of non-Olympic popularity. It's really hard to break through everything
Yeah,
else we're
but Jordan,
oversaturated with.
I never really thought Americans would be watching the EPL on NBC on weekends. I really didn't. So, I mean, who knows? Right now, the USA women's rugby team still ranked, I should say, only with air quotes around it, ninth in the world. We'll see if it translates into more success for the American team too.
Right. Well, and that's the other thing, right? Is how many, it's a little trite to say this, but like how many people, how many young girls watched and were inspired to give this sport a try. So that's where I'd be interested in to see if this has any movement in sort of the youth ranks and opportunities for players to discover this sport and build up the
Well,
field of competitors, so to speak,
based on
right?
my experience with high school girls, there's a lot of young women out there who'd like to go out and play sports in part, just like boys do, in part to beat the hell out of the other team, as well as show their athletic talent. And now maybe this is a big alternative to field hockey. It's getting so popular. We'll see.
I just want to say that old Jordan would have taken what you mentioned about beating the hell out of people, and I would have made a joke about you, but I've been told by a very important source close to the show to bring more love. So, Peter,
Well, I'm
I don't
glad
want
you
to tackle you. Now I want to hug you.
I'm glad you're bringing the bringing this reprieve from violence for your co-host to the holiday season. I'm very grateful.
All right. Well, while Peter and I snuggle for a minute, we're going to take a break and be right after this. We're back, and let's keep rolling. And Peter, with number 7 on our list of the best underdog moments of 2024, I'm going to go right into our wheelhouse, the area where we made our names as young bucks. College basketball, NCAA tournament upsets, and it was another big, big performance by our statistical model, giant killers, bracket breakers, whatever you want to call it, when Oakland, as a 14 seed, upset Kentucky as a 3 seed in the first round. Peter, our model, known as Slingshot to people who talk to it, gave Oakland a 19% chance of an upset, which is pretty damn big for a 14 seed. The market, if you looked at money lines, implied only about a 12% chance. So we were ahead of the market on that. And what's even cooler is we kind of told you how it would happen. Okay. We said Oakland shoots a lot of threes, more than 40% of their shots. Good offensive rebounding team. But even more so, Kentucky was exactly the type of vulnerable giant we've seen lose in the past. And what was funny was they were getting a lot of Final Four buzz. They had this freshman backcourt off the bench of Reed Shepherd and Dillingham. But we saw some real vulnerabilities there. They were heavily reliant on threes. They were not great on the glass. In fact, we wrote the following. In our spreadsheet's history, favorites with strong giant tendencies, like dominant offensive rebounding or perimeter defense, were toppled in just 8% of 3-14 matchups. But for higher seeds who don't carry those traits, such as Kentucky, that proportion jumps to 21%, confirming that diagnosis. Of the 10 most similar games of this contest, 2 ended an upset. Lehigh over Duke in 2012, and Richmond over Iowa in 2022. So what happened? We all remember Jack Gulke. I think he was 48 years old at the time of the game and had a receding hairline.
Yeah. He was in his 17th year.
Yeah.
Right.
Went 10 for 20 from 3. Trey Townsend had 17 and 12. They grabbed 14 offensive rebounds, turned it over only 7 times, and Kentucky went 9 for 28 from 3. Oakland won 80-76.
Look, if you study this stuff, this is the kind of matchup that was easy to fall in love with in advance. You have Kentucky, who people basically were talking about being a Final Four contender, partially because they're Kentucky. And I mean, when you don't look at the meaning of underlying stats, or you assume all rebounding stats are the same, or you assume one program is better than another, you're bound to be overrated. Meanwhile, people still don't know. You go up to people and say, "Where is Oakland?" Oakland's not in California, Jordan. But in this case, look, if you're a gaudy record in a famous program, but you're not good offensive rebounding, right? You're just not going to take care of extra possessions. You're not going to seize enough of your own missed shots, even on a good or bad, whether you're having good or bad shooting night. And Oakland was a high volume 3-point shooting team. It's hard to make money on the money line consistently, right? Like, a team that has a 20% chance, you should make money over time. If everyone else thinks they have a 10% chance, it's actually hard to do that because there aren't enough games to do that with. But this one was just screaming out at us. And big upset, fun players, came true. Kentucky was weak, exactly where it matters in the tournament.
And to your point, I made a couple bucks on this one. So
that was okay. Sometimes it's easier to make money on the money line.
Yeah, that's right. So look, it was the biggest upset seed wise in the tournament.
In the whole tournament.
Yep. Yeah. And look, people forget the next round, Oakland took NC State to overtime. They were in a 14-11 game. So they were very close to a Sweet 16 berth. And obviously the nation will never forget Jack Gulke. Trey Townsend has moved on and transferred to Kentucky, right? But
ironically enough, yes. I will say.
Excuse me, not to Kentucky, to Arizona. What my mind
Oh, I'm
is,
sorry.
Yes,
but he's gone.
He beat Kentucky. He's at Arizona now.
Yeah, but they're they grow up so fast, Jordan. Everybody you don't get a lot of back-to-back giant killers anymore because of the transfer portal.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. You see them do well in the tournament, and you come right the cover. But
I will say this, Jordan. I want to congratulate you this year. Once again, I believe we can claim tongue-in-cheek many things, but I do believe on the merits we are the nation's premier analysts of 14-11 matchups in the NCAA tournament.
Well, if you're going to hang your hat on one thing,
that territory, hang my hat on that territory. I claim for us.
All right. Well, let's move on to item number 6 and the final one of today's show. And Peter, it's just more exciting than Oakland over Kentucky was our NFL Week 3 underdog parlay.
Yeah, Jordan, this was back in Week 3 when underdogs were crushing it in the NFL early season, right? It took a long time for this difference between the very best and very worst teams to kind of shake out, and winless teams were doing pretty well back then. Yep.
So winless teams were doing very well. So we looked up a stat, and over the past decade, winless teams in Week 3 were 40-21 against the spread. almost when basically 2/3 are winners, that's something that catches your eye. And it's something you may even want to bet blindly. And then we decided to take it one step further and not only parlay the 5 teams who fit that criteria on the spread, but also on the money line. Now, let's talk about who we ended up with, okay?
All right. Yeah.
First, you had the Giants going to Cleveland. Now, at the time, that looked even more daunting than it was, okay? You had, I forget there was a reason why the Titans didn't qualify, but we didn't have the Titans. So we had the Giants, the Broncos, who at the time, again, we didn't think they were any good. They were 0-2, and they were going to Tampa, who was 2-0. All right. The Panthers, who were off to just a god awful start, they went to Vegas to play the Raiders. You had the Rams going to play the 49ers, and then a Monday night game, the Jaguars at the Bills. So we parlayed them. All right. You put $10, Sarah put $10, I put $10. Our $30 5-team money line parlay would have paid us $10,493.13.
Oh yeah, a
So what happened?
$10,500 payoff sitting right there in front of us. The ultimate test of sometimes you have to zag when everyone's zigging. Bet on all the winless teams.
Yep.
Believe the stats. Trust the process. Just go for it. And then the pins started to fall one after
So what
another.
happened? While I'm coaching baseball, the Giants and Broncos won in the early games. The Panthers built a nice lead, but the 49ers were up 14 on the Rams in the third quarter. Then a lot of fluky plays, a punt return, some missed field goals, made field goals. Suddenly the Rams came back, and we were 4-0 after the Sunday slate, which means we were a Jaguars win away on Monday night from winning this ridiculous parlay. And that's when the offer came in. We had
wait. Before you get to
okay.
I just want to say personal note. This is my wife's birthday, and I want everybody to know that I spent my wife's birthday out at a lovely restaurant, running to the bar section of the restaurant so that I could take calls from Jordan about what was going on with the 49ers Rams game. Just how you want to spend some quality time with the family.
Okay, this is one of those things that probably will never happen again. Let's be honest. So we had one win left for this $10,500 score. We had a cash out offer of about $3,200 at that point. Okay. So we hemmed and we hawed. Do you take the cash out? We pulled Twitter. In the end, as Sarah said to us, if you cash out, what do we even stand for anymore? So,
yes. So as a result, look, I'm more conservative than you two when it comes to betting. And also I need money. So I just want to say this for the record, I was bullied by Jordan, Sarah, and our Twitter audience into accepting the deal, to accepting the idea that we should stay for the ride.
No, first of all, our Twitter audience said cash out. What we did was we hedged. We bet a certain amount of money on the Bills money line to guarantee a nice profit. Okay, but when you did the math, the cash out offer wasn't enough to justify it. So the odds were better in what we did with the hedge. As we all know, the Bills went on to destroy the Jaguars, crush our hopes and dreams. We still made a nice profit off that and the spread parlay. But man, we were one Jaguar win away from glory.
One reason I'm really hoping that you eventually get to do a gambling 101 podcast, should I say even a master class perhaps, is because I still need somebody to understand, to explain to me in a way that I understand how it didn't make sense mathematically to just take some cash instead of betting on the freaking Jacksonville Jaguars. But that's just me.
Yeah. Well, look, what was really interesting too was that sort of was the crescendo of an amazing start for deep underdogs in the NFL.
Yeah.
Since that time, it's gone the other way. All of a sudden, the worst teams are, as we've discussed, really, really bad. So we hit it just at the right time because the worm has turned, my friend. And speaking of turning, it's time to turn over to the end of this episode. But we'll be back next week with the top 5 underdog stories of 2024.